The second point I want to make is the second building block is about China's likely behavior as a global power. Now, we all wonder about this, don't we? We all think, what is it going to be like? Because, you know, in view of the prospect that it will become the dominant country in the world, how is it going to operate? You know? And I think it will operate in a way which is very different from the Western tradition. In particular, the United States and prior to that, Britain. And I think that the steer for this, I think, has to be history. You know, how historically have the Chinese behaved as a major power in their own time, compared with for example, the Western experience. Now, there is a very, very lazy Western way of thinking about, for example, China, about lots of things about to do with China, but in the context of Africa. You know, how many times have you read something which says, you know, China and Africa, the new colonialism? Well, this is so lazy, because actually, unless you include, which you can do, the Chinese expansion under the Qing dynasty from the early mid-17th century onwards, where they expanded into the western regions, which I was describing earlier on. Now, you can argue that was a form of colonialism. I think it would be you can, but it was internal. It was continental expansion. It was not overseas maritime expansion, which was the absolutely classical form of European expansion, especially after the great discoveries and the development of the great colonial empires of the 18th and 19th and first half of the 20th centuries. Now, the Chinese never expanded like that. They never had any colonies. They could have had colonies. I mean, China was far more advanced than its neighbors for a very long period of history. So, for example, the colonization of Southeast Asia would have been, for the Chinese during the Ming dynasty with those great ships of Zheng He and so on, an absolute doddle.